Okay, so for those of you who are remote, again, this is part of our Learning and Language Technologies Symposium that we're having here at UMass Amherst at the Center for Intelligent Information Retrieval. We have a series of 6 speakers. One is done, and now we have 5 more coming. Our next speaker is Brendan O'Connor. Brendan is an associate professor here at the College of Information and Computer Sciences at UMass Amherst, who works at the intersection of computational social science and natural language processing. At UMass, he's an associate director of the Computational Social Science Institute, which is a cross-college institute that looks at the computational social science things. He holds a PhD in machine learning from Carnegie Mellon University and a bachelor's and master's in symbolic systems from Stanford. He's previously been a visiting fellow at the Harvard Institute for Quantitative Social Science and worked on technology companies, including Crowdflower. He is today going to talk to us about event extraction for social science. Please welcome Brendan O'Connor.
All right, thanks. I told James I don't know if this fits into things. I hope someone finds this interesting. But yeah, so I'm going to talk about social factors and language. If you think about a kind of a broad perspective of what's going on in this human behavior, when people are speaking and creating different types of language data, there's this very tight interaction between factors that we think about in society or in social interactions, social structures, a list of all sorts of things, maybe demographics, maybe interactions, etc. Versus all the things we think about in artificial intelligence, very broad representations of mental concepts, decisions, cognition, language, vision, all of that. And in general, there's a huge amounts of interaction, very tight coupling between these factors that I think are becoming better understood, especially as we see artificial intelligence being used in social situations in general. And my research looks a lot at specifically social factors and just language. I don't do all the other stuff. And today I want to talk about some projects and how natural language processing specifically can help us learn about society from a perspective maybe more like social scientific strategy, kind of maybe a broad social level. And in lots of situations, we can think about, okay, we have all these textual corpora, but where do they come from? And maybe it's maybe a little obvious, but they come from people. People interact with each other, people are thinking each other, people are generating culture, people are transmitting culture, people are migrating, etc. Through a set of social processes and media publishing systems that are different in different millennia. We have some sort of writing, we end up with textual data, whether it's social media, corpora, whether it's books, and all sorts of groups. In one set of projects that I'm working on, we're very interested in analyzing racial correlates of language use, or language use as it's correlated to race in the United States. We might think of there's racial demographics in often neighborhoods based on their cultural or racial background that might affect what sorts of social media writing they do. We can analyze this in order to get a better understanding of how language is generated. In particular, we're interested in ethnic dialects in the United States, getting better characterization. For example, particular forms of morphosyntactic features like finna that are common in the US South and especially common in African English. Here we can use social media as a corpus in order to do linguistic social research. And another set of projects I'm going to focus on today, I'm very interested in analyzing real-world political events. And not just me, but many analysts or social scientists are interested in this. And there's a number of interesting settings, I think, where there's some sort of events going on in the real world that are often political or socio-political, something like that, I'd say. There's some sort of process where news data gets generated. And from reading the newspapers, we can maybe make some inferences about what's going on in the world. And as one example of this is, you may have seen in the last several years, a number of major news websites have very detailed data visualizations of people who are shot and killed by police or victims of fatal victims of police or brutality or all sorts of other situations. And just having the literal counts of how many people have been killed by police, say in the last 12 months, is a data collection problem And in fact, journalists and researchers do this collection highly manually because police departments in the United States don't report them despite statutes and regulations that say they're supposed to report them to a centralized federal government authority. So the government is not, the US government system as a whole is not able to collect this data. However, this information does exist if you collect it from different departments in different ways. And a major source of this information actually is local news reports or news reports about it. You can't analyze all sorts of things in the world based on what news writes about it, but the case of a fatality is a large enough that often there's good news data about it. And these databases are really made by journalists, people kind of the activists, the social scientists, spectrum of the world, who really do read through thousands of articles. And so we did a project where we tried to see if we could make some sort of NLP, natural processing information extraction methods that could help recover some of this information from this type of databases. And so today I wanted to talk about an effort, a recent effort where we're looking at how to build data sets that will let us better evaluate whether these sorts of analysis methods that we want to extract sort of socio-political event data are really working well. And there's a bunch of challenges in this area to make useful data sets. So this was a project we did a few years ago with Culturman, now at Michigan State, Keith, now at Williams College, and Sheikh Sarwar from here, who's almost corporation, Amazon, I'm sorry. And we, everyone graduated, went off and did great things. And so we were interested in collecting a data set to help support this type of research. And so the big issue, which affected the previous police fatalities work that we did, but also affects lots of efforts in this area, is that most current data sets for event extraction, we think of the natural language processing, political science perspectives, they don't support kind of the aggregate evaluation of socio-political event extraction. So our overall goal in this research and related research is often at the level of temporal aggregate. So over time, when did police, for example, fail to act when you think they would be supposed to? And there's a lot of data sets, if you get kind of deep in information extraction processing, that are very fine-grained and a little too micro scale in some ways, with often annotated kind of a collection of documents and newspaper articles for certain types of events, even including fatalities. But the documents that were selected for that were not necessarily selected to show a general social phenomenon, so it can kind of hard to tell what the accuracy is from the text. On the other side, coming maybe more out of political science related world, are very macro level sets, where these are often focused on really getting kind of longitudinals over large amounts of space and time, collection of events. And a lot of these ones are made by people who don't care about natural language processing, they're not thinking about using NLP to do them. They really just want to create the tuples, the event database record that's as accurate as possible. And a lot of these are, some of these efforts are very impressive. Some of them are kind of manually challenging. Quality ones, just they're huge. And there have been some efforts also to do more automated ones, but there's no really great evaluation data sets to really test whether or not we're doing a good job this type of socio-political extraction. And so for this project, we're interested in collecting a data set that allowed both types, the NLP type of a micro level, but social science type of evaluation. And so we have a new data set we've released, which is tasking evaluation. We have some modeling results with kind of zero-shot type models and maybe related information. So for the data set, we focused on a particular episode. It's called the Gujarat riots, Gujarat violence, series of really bad Hindu-Muslim violence in India. And this is an area of, as a historical episode, it's of intense interest to political scientists and other researchers. And in fact, there's previous work that we discuss a lot in our paper that manually analyze a large collection of news articles to get the sort of time series of different events related to violence. And so for this project, we sought to do kind of conceptual replication of the setting where we could do NLP evaluation, where we collected Times of India articles, English language newspaper from March 2002 with some filtering, and our goal is to annotate all 1,200 stories, 12,000 sentences for certain types of events. And so the annotations were done in kind of more expert annotator, not a crowdsource setting with undergraduate RAs here at UMass. And there's a lot of different ways to formulate event extraction. We took a Boolean question answering form, where if you notice the questions that we're interested in, they sure look like single arguments and kind of more traditional event semantics. So did police kill someone on specifying who they killed? Did police arrest someone? Did police fail to act or not intervene? Did police use force or other violence? Or did they say just all of the above? And so these are questions that in particular have been of interest to political science historians for this episode. So they trained annotators and just did a Boolean selection on every single sentence from this corpus. And so it took a lot of time skipping over all of that. And so here's kind of the main event classes, those 5 that we just did there. Maybe not a surprise, lots of events that are of intense interest have a very low prevalence in terms of the proportion of sentences that even a fairly low prevalence in terms of the number of documents that exhibit at least one instance. And so, all right, so then we started looking at the kind of the NLP star tasks, and we're really seeking to establish baselines here. We weren't doing extensive modeling. One of the more interesting models in this area, I guess, is the zero-shot natural language methods. We said here's the input sentence. We have kind of this declarative statement about the possible event, and then use verb to predict an intelligent category there, using a particular set of prompt queries, using what is now a very standard sort of. There's interesting issues here as well. I was actually at the time quite surprised that it worked significantly better than kind of the keyword search. I don't know if these categories are perfect, but this is 0.74 for a setting with no supervision. That's quite something. And there's a lot of hype around zero-shot methods, so there it is. We can also look at document. So here the setting is I want to read through documents in order to find events of interest. Using MLI as a ranker actually does work better than keyword document retrieval approaches, because I think the event classes really care. In particular, we advocate evaluating through proportion of corpus that you would have to read in order to achieve a certain high level of recall. This more closely simulates what analysts do, social scientists, intelligence analysts, historians sort of setting, where their baseline is they read through 1,200 articles. Well, this isn't a case, even for this really tricky case, please be able to act, they have to read 76% of 1,200 articles. And so you'll see now the curve. This is used in kind of IR also. Finally, social aggregates. We also advocate analyzing based on this. If you have both standard annotations, you get this particular curve over time, over the different weeks, you get good drop violence. With a poor model, you get a very bad view of what's going on. But if you have a better method, in this case, it's Roberta-based MLI, we are testing, you get certain aspects. You get a rough indication. It's not perfect. For certain uses, it might be sufficient, especially for earlier stage analysis. Ideally, preliminary analysis that a historian or social scientist would do for doing a deeper dive, ideally. And so I just want to make the point that we have all these 3 tasks can all be evaluated on this data set. And then when you're in these corpus analysis settings, you really are getting simultaneous inferences at all levels of analysis. I think lots of different disciplines, we only look at a single level of analysis at a time, it's not more convenient. But all of these levels together, what's really important for social analysis settings and certain types of learning research. I think that is a really useful and interesting area for future. So, as I said again, there's data set is out there. We propose this task and evaluation. There's some work in zero-shot and natural language inference, and we're trying to do more. So I think it's kind of an exciting area for lots of applications. So, all right, we can take some questions.
I know the science is often ahead of the public policy, but do you think that with a new possible administration coming up soon, you think this could potentially delay the amount of time before we see policy changes based on this new way to evaluate these critical issues?
I'm not sure I understand which issues. I mean, policy is hard.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of political contention for any research on political contentious issues.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of scholarly work always going on that is looking at important issues and how to interface that, better research tools to better public understanding, or eventually more the activist side with change is really complex, right?
Right.
And so this is I don't know, this is very data oriented, like, well, if you get better data, maybe that'll make the world better, which is naive.
Right.
Perfect.
It's a good thought though.
Yeah, well, it depends what you're doing. I would argue, I've seen these things come up a lot. Maybe it's just my world of worrying about police violence in the United States, et cetera. I mean, these things all really started after 2014. Started when they're over class 20, of course. These sort of things can make a difference to the public. And the requirements are different in different settings, typically simpler quantitative summaries, more useful for public facing data journals, et cetera. But they have to do a ton of data work to make this even happen in the first place. And I think if we could do a better job supporting that sort of data work, that could be a really valuable contribution from the company.
And that's I want to piggyback off that to the second question. Like, so as a graduate data student, how could I do some of that? Like, what's the process? Is it just literally banging on the door of your local newspaper and saying, hey, data science student for hire, or we'll work for pizza?
A lot of things. I think setting up relationships and collaborations is just really, really hard. So here at UMass, for one thing, we've brought up on the summer data science, good, where that's a lot of work goes into establishing particular internship-like opportunities. I'm not super familiar with that, and it's a lot of work to do those. And so for some of this work, we actually talked with one of these like nonprofit journalists, some research places. It's like the one that's providing like half the data to Washington. It's just like one guy working on it. And it's quite remarkable how these things happen. It takes time.
Yeah, last question.
You can't get all.
No, I just wanted to.
Are there any other questions? I don't mind, you're gonna interrupt this gentleman, but okay, you get your last question.
Can I shake your hand before I leave?
Oh, sure. We might have time for another question.
Yes, there is still time. I'm curious, was this all done, was the India stuff, was that all done in English? Was it an English newspaper? In
English,
India?
yes, English.
Do you think that there would be any problems of shifting this to a different language?
I think it's.
I mean, particularly with multilingual embedding capabilities and verbs and things.
Yeah, multilingual, I don't think it works better than it used to. I think my impression is when I read this literature that just language accuracies per language vary quite a bit. Low resources are really bad. Hindi is an example of notoriously low accuracies, especially relative to population, right? And so accuracy will be worse. I think something we don't know is how much does it affect sort of uses we want to do when accuracy varies. And so I think we just have no idea about that. That looks more like kind of statistical error measurement questions, right? And so problem is you have that conflated with that media attention is going to be different for topics or for different language, which we expect it to be. And it's sometimes maybe unclear. Well, you're going to get both effects at once. Yeah.
Okay, there's one remote question, but why don't we start moving to the next speaker, getting set up for the next speaker while that's happening?